The Pelicans' loss to the Boston Celtics showed you that Willie Green needs to stick with the starting lineup more, and that means Jonas Valanciunas. But don't think that fixes the center position for the Pels. I'll explain in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go!
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday, and yeah, we are going to talk about the Pelicans losing 104-92 to the Boston Celtics. I got some thoughts. Yeah, there probably should have been more Jonas Valanciunas in this game, but I actually don't think it would have made that big of a difference. But regardless, the Larry to start the third quarter, second half, has got to end because it's not working. We're going to break all of that down, look at the center position overall and why it's imperative they figured this out, as well as Dyson Daniels' return. How'd he do? We'll break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this team, whether it's the run towards the playoffs, changes they need to make. We'll get into the draft, free agency, all of that. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday. And if you are, let me know in the comments down below. Okay, this game against the Boston Celtics. Good first quarter, rough rest of the way, particularly in the third quarter where the Pelicans scored just 11 points. Why did things go so poorly? So part of this, I think people want to look at the center position, and I'll see it in the comments here, like they should have played Jonas Valanciunas more. Yes, Jonas Valanciunas wasn't going to be an answer. Look, the Boston Celtics won their 58th game in this one. They are by far the best team in the league, and it's not particularly close when it comes to wins and losses, right? They have 7 more wins than the next closest team to them. They're good. Losing to them is something that's going to just happen, right? We know the center position is an issue for New Orleans. It reared its ugly head here. They're just not as good as the Boston Celtics are in probably any capacity. That's okay. Boston is Boston. This is New Orleans. You can't necessarily try and compare the two. They're having different seasons. I think that was a big part of it. That's why I don't know if there's really time to panic or anything like that. When it comes to this, this is just a better team winning, and sometimes it's as simple as that. However, starting Larry Nance Jr. in the second half, coming out of the break, it's time to stop this. And this is not necessarily an endorsement of Jonas Valanciunas, and more on him in a minute, but it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked all season as they have tried to do this, and it certainly didn't work in this quarter as the Pelicans scored just 11 points. In that third quarter, with Larry Nance Jr. getting that kind of initial run here, and I have the game flow in front of me, let me pull it up, it wasn't good, right? He was -8 in 6 minutes of action to start the second quarter, or the second half, the third quarter. That's where they lost the game, right? It was close going in. Boston got momentum going into halftime. No one decided to guard Derek White. That was disappointing. They kind of had a botched 2-for-1, 3-for-2 opportunity, really, at the end of the half as well. So none of that just went well for New Orleans. They lost the lead. They lost the momentum. And they came out, and the adjustment they tried to make of starting Larry Nance Jr. didn't work. If it was one game and they were trying it, that'd be one thing. It's not. We've seen them do this regularly, and it has not worked. I don't think starting Larry Nance Jr. in the third quarter, the second half, has really worked at all. And you saw just evidence in full display here. Porzingis has a huge height advantage over him. So does Al Horford, right? And while Larry is shorter than Valanciunas was going to struggle too. And again, more on that here, right? Here's the thing. Even if I don't think Jonas Valanciunas is the answer, and I do think the center position is just a problem they don't have an answer to. And sometimes problems like that exist during a basketball season. There's not a whole lot you can do it, right? The starters, though, in their first stint, won their minutes. That first run of the starters out there ended when they subbed out Jonas Valanciunas, and the team was up by 8 points. They had a 7-0 run and a 9-0 run during that stretch. And then you never saw that lineup out there again. This is weird to me. That lineup won their minutes. That's the end of the day what you're trying to do. Why would you not see that lineup again? Why not see it once? Again, this is less about Jonas Valanciunas, more about a lineup that was working. Right? Jonas didn't have a good game in this one, I don't think. He was 1 of 5. He wasn't the answer to trying to get this win over the Boston Celtics. It was other things that they needed. It wasn't Jonas necessarily here. But your starting lineup was working. It was working. Why would you go away for that for a lineup with Larry Nance Jr. that doesn't work and hasn't worked? And here's the numbers with it, right? With Jonas Valanciunas, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas, 157 possessions this season, has a net rating of 14.6. The offense is bad, but the defense is very, very good. And the offense has room to probably improve there. Okay. You run that same lineup with Larry Nance Jr. in at center instead of Jonas Valanciunas. 142 possessions, so 15 possession difference. They're somewhat similar. It's got a net rating of minus 7.5, so that's a difference of like 22 in terms of net rating. The defense is bad and the offense is bad with that lineup with Larry Nance Jr. They've talked about how they do that to help them defensively. It is a worse defensive lineup based off of the numbers. There's no need to go to that anymore. That starting lineup has been playing well enough. You need to probably run them in the second half and go with that, or at least run them again, right? I don't think Jonas Valanciunas is the answer, but if you have a lineup that worked, you absolutely need to run that lineup at least one other freaking time in the game, right? That seems like it would be a good idea. You didn't see that happen. That, to me, is the worst part of this. Not should Jonas have played or not should they have played through him. It's nothing to do with that. It's you had a lineup that worked and you didn't go back to it for a minute later in the game. I don't understand that. To me, that is truly like a very baffling thing to see. That is the biggest problem here. They need to stop the Larry Nance Jr. starting the second half of games. They need to go with lineups that are working and see if you can win some more of those minutes and change the outcome of a game. But that doesn't mean that Jonas Valanciunas is the answer or that he fixes the center position, because I do think this is a problem for New Orleans and they don't have an answer to it. I want to look at that, Jonas Valanciunas, the offseason a little bit, and Zion at the 5. They went with that a lot, the entirety of the fourth quarter. What did we learn from that? That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. And it's because it's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less on 2 or more players and their stat projection, and then you watch the winnings roll in. March is over, but the biggest moments in college basketball tip off in April. Be part of the action at Prize Picks for both the men's and women's college basketball tournament. That's going to go up to April 8th. So get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take on the game to a new level during the basketball postseason as well. And again, you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Turn $10 into $1,000 on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match up to $100 when you download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNBA. And it's pick more, pick less. Prize Picks, it's that easy. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, covering everything you want to know about the team, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the #1 Pelicans podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments down below. Do you think Jonas Valanciunas is the answer? Is it more about the lineup? Is it play through him? Let me know what you think. I don't think it's that, but they should have played him more. Less Larry right now, I think, is a good thing because, look, them being undersized is not the answer either. We've definitely seen enough now that what they're doing isn't working. So, by the way, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Pelicans have a center problem. They have a center problem. And look, I don't think there's an answer to the problem this season, which is why I'm not overly worried about it, right? You just got to make do. And I think it's when you're looking at the postseason that when you see this, hey, you're looking for matchups, ideally a team like the Clippers, maybe even the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think, that basically render your center position not a concern. But against other teams, it's going to be, right? Jonas I don't think he's like a miserable defender. I don't think he's an average or good defender. He holds his own at times, but they're limited with what they want to try and do, right? The switching is what they want to run. He doesn't fit that. He holds his own, but you have to kind of change coverages, and the defense is better at times without him. We've seen that for sure, but he's not as bad as people want to make him out to be. But this isn't a long-term solution, right? There isn't exactly spacing with Jonas Valanciunas. There isn't particularly great spacing with Larry Nance Jr. either, because Joe Mazzulla, I can tell you, the Boston Celtics head coach, was thrilled with Larry Nance Jr. taking those shots that he took in this game. They want him shooting. So you kind of played into their hands and were, in a sense, outcoached in that way, right? Like that wasn't the way that you were going to win this game. Larry finished with 5 points on 2 of 5 shooting, 1 of 3 from deep, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. It's not a particularly impactful game. Jonas Valanciunas in this one, 2 points, 5 rebounds, 0 for 1 from 3, 1 of 5 from the field, 2 assists. Neither was impactful because the center position is a problem for the Pelicans. They need to figure that out this offseason. But they don't have an answer to it right now. Some games you'll be okay. Some games you won't. It's really that simple. The defense from Kristaps Porzingis from the Boston Celtics, who were great in this game, was a problem. Porzingis had 4 blocks in this one, right? He kind of blocked everybody, it seemed like. So you weren't going to run into a very good situation here. He blocked one from Hawkins, Nance, Zion, and Murphy. So you weren't going to have really what you wanted at all occur in this game. So you've got to figure out the center position in another way. And that's going to be in the offseason. Right now, though, what the Pelicans tried to do was run Zion Williamson. Well, hold on. More on the Jonas Valanciunas thing. So the starters won their minutes in that first period. They were a positive 8. The next time Jonas Valanciunas stepped into the game, he had a 3-minute stint from the start of the second quarter going into 8 minutes and 49 seconds remaining in the second quarter. He was a -7 during that time. It wasn't like he was impactful in the other times that he was out there on the court, right? Those minutes right there that I'm talking about were against Kristaps Porzingis, who just gave him a ton of trouble. You know, his next stint late in the third quarter after they took out Larry, after Larry went basically, that lineup went was -8. He was a -5. So in the other stints that he played, he was a what is that? Where did the numbers go? He's -7 in that 3-minute stint and then a -5. So he's a -12 otherwise. It wasn't like he was doing much better when he was out there. Some of that's lineup based, and we'll get more into Dyson Daniels and that stuff in the next segment here. Some of that's lineup based, and that's why I said play the starters more, not play Jonas Valanciunas more. There's a big difference between the two things. So they tried Zion at the 5 to see if maybe that would do something. I don't know what to make of all of this right now, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, Zion at the 5, I don't know if that's something that you can truly do long term. I actually took notes during this game, and one of my notes literally on my phone here, let me pull it up. Where is that? Was because you're getting increased rebounding from guys like Trey Murphy, the third, from Zion Williamson, you can try other lineups like Zion at the 5. So in the fourth quarter, they didn't play Larry Nance Jr. or Jonas Valanciunas. The Pelicans won that quarter 24-21. Zion feasted with this lineup, 10 points on 3 of 4 shooting. Big problem for him and the team in the game in this one was missing at the free throw line. He was 4 of 7, but he also had 3 rebounds and assists and didn't have a turnover. He was really good during this stretch when he was out there on the court playing the 5. Does that mean that that's a long-term answer? I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure. But with him playing the 5, they had a 13-3 run and a 7-2 run. That's pretty useful, I think, in there. The problem is Boston got off hot to start that quarter 2 in the 4th and kind of buried New Orleans. But because Boston was also up by so much going into the 4th quarter, should we read too much into the fact that lineup kind of worked? Or is it just one of those things of it's just a lot of noise because Boston wasn't trying nearly as hard at that point in time? And they were still trying. That's a team that is well coached and isn't going to just want to give up and not try. But it all goes to say they have a center position. And in the playoffs might be decided by, do they just get a favorable matchup where the center position isn't actually a problem for the Pelicans? Or is it something like where you run into Denver? And look, no one has an answer for Denver and Jokic here, right? But I also think that OKC is going to be trouble because of Holmgren out there on the perimeter. I don't think JV was the answer to that either, right? Otherwise, you would see him in these other minutes that he's playing be more effective. He's not. So they need to address this offseason. It's why they were really looking at trying to get someone else during the NBA's trade deadline. And at this point, they should have just traded for Daniel Gafford. I don't think he's actually better, but as much as I think you can at times use JV better than you are, if you're not going to use him at all, just get a guy that would have played, right? The move would have been trade for Gafford at this point. That's hindsight. We know that now. But this has been an issue all season. It's why, again, they look to kind of adjust from that during the trade deadline. Couldn't find anything, and I'm sure we'll see some of these talks revisited during this offseason. Maybe they can go and get a Miles Turner. Maybe it is a guy like Jared Allen. Maybe it's just draft somebody that you think fits a little bit better. We've seen rookie centers, in Dallas with Lively II make an impact. Jalen Duren over in Detroit has made an impact. You've seen other guys as well. Mark Williams with the Charlotte Hornets has played well also. So there's a number of guys that have been impact rookies that I think really can help you and play well for you. And if you can go and get one of those guys, well, that's definitely worth doing if he fits the scheme and everything that they want to run. So that's something that we will be covering tremendously this offseason, where the Pelicans also potentially have 2 first-round picks, depending on what they want to do with the Lakers pick that they have the rights potentially to. They can either use that this year or next year, depending. So Zion at the center looked good. There was space. You could run. You could play fast, right? CJ was making some shots. Herb was at least attempting threes. You saw some Matt Ryan minutes as they tried to just do something. I would have preferred those minutes for Trey. They put him back in. The rebounding wasn't atrocious during that run either. That's an important thing. Maybe it's something that you experiment with a little bit more, though I don't think it's really the time to experiment with things anymore. Boston certainly can because, well, yeah, they've locked up the 1 seed, but this is something that New Orleans needs to figure out, and they need to just try to kind of find the best Band-Aid for it right now, and it's probably just playing JV with the starters to start the second half and not playing Larry Nance Jr. in that and using him a little bit less and more off the bench with that sort of thing. We'll see, though. They get a chance to go back out, compete against the Phoenix Suns in this game. We'll see what ends up happening here. Nurkic is not a great center. That gives them, maybe a bit of an advantage here. So we'll see how they're going to match up with this team. But the standings are getting tight, and we'll look at that, and I'll give you the strength of schedules. We can project some wins, things like that, for the future of this team, because I don't think they're going to end up in the play-in, but they're losing their grip a little bit potentially on the 5th seed as well, and that's not an ideal situation. So Dyson Daniels returned, and he should not be playing. He shouldn't be playing. I'll tell you why. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers an amazing viewing experience with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and conferences as well. Fire TVs lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and a whole lot more. Check out Fire TVs on the Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me, I keep it up now all the time. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, whether it's the in-game adjustments that aren't working for head coach Willie Green, to some changes we think we want to see made, to what the offseason is going to look at, and center is certainly going to be a very big, important part of that and kind of shape the entirety of the offseason. We'll look into the draft, free agency. We're going to cover it all here. It's a lot of fun. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 Pelicans podcast. And join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. So, and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday. Let me know in the comments down below. If you see me at the arena for any of the 3 games this week, I got Locked On Pelicans stickers with me. I'll give them to you. I appreciate everyone showing me love and supporting the podcast. So let's move on from this, for the most part, from this Boston game, right? You know, part of this I do think is just Boston's good. They're better than the Pelicans, right? You lost to a better team. I don't think there was an answer to what Boston was doing. I would have liked if they just didn't play into Boston's hand nearly as much. They tried to do some things that I thought were kind of good and aggressive, and I dug that, right? Zion at the 4 was something Zion at the 5, something we really haven't seen. What you were doing before with JV and Nance wasn't working, so go with that. I like that attitude with that sort of thing. Even though it kind of went really, really poorly for them to end the first half, they ran a pretty slick play to try and run a 2-for-1 opportunity, and that's where you try to get 2 possessions to your opponent's 1 possession at the end of a quarter. So if there's 40 seconds or so, you run a quick possession, take a quick shot, you make it, you miss it, whatever. They get a possession, but there's more than 24 seconds left on the shot clock, so you will get the final shot of that quarter. You get 2 possessions to their 1. It's a really useful thing when you're trying to maximize possessions in the NBA. They tried to do that with like 34 seconds left, which is like not the time that you do that when you've got to go full court to generate a shot. But they ran a play where the ball was inbounded to like Herb Jones, and then he just screams up the court with a couple of screens. He doesn't lay the ball in well. Boston gets it. They run down the court, make a shot, and then the Pelicans didn't do well on the next offensive end, and that gave Derek White time to kind of launch that 3, which no one contested. So they didn't do a good job of all of it, but I like that they were at least doing something to be aggressive, to try and go and win the game or end the quarter in their advantage. Again, botched it, didn't work. It's okay. Sometimes doing the right thing is an important thing. One of the right things is making sure you're running the correct rotation here. And I don't know if this team truly did that in this game. Dyson Daniels returned from injury. He has no injury designation for tonight's game against the Phoenix Suns, which is great to see him come back from the meniscus injury, certainly. And in about 11 minutes of action, you know, he was out there on the court, and it was great to see. He's a good defender. You could see it. He was aggressive. He was trying to move the ball. He was trying to rebound the ball. But I don't think you can play him right now or play him in a playoff rotation. The offense just isn't there, and that's a lot of the Pelicans' problem. The defense is good, right? They held Boston to 104 points, 102 points, whatever the number was. Like, that's a good number there. However, you've got to score. You've got to score, and that's not something that the Pelicans have done a good job of at times. Dyson Daniels was absolutely trigger shy. He was scared to shoot. There's a time in the corner where he's wide open. He's got to take it. There was a time that he was down low near the basket. Just put the ball up, man. You're right there. And he didn't do that. It's okay. It's okay. He's just returning from injury. Getting him some runs important. Getting him kind of back into the flow of things is important too. But you're trying to win the game, you need offense, right? You know, I mentioned that second stint for JV where he's a -7 in 3 minutes of action. The Pelicans went CJ McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas, Jordan Hawkins, Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels. They're trying to kind of recreate that CJ, JV, and shooters with one defender lineup that they had working earlier on in the year, and it just didn't work here, right? Partially because Jonas Valanciunas was outmatched here, I think, when they had both Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis on the court during that time. That's a lot of length that bothers JV like that. CJ wasn't shooting enough during that stretch. Dyson Daniels is your defender in there, but you need more of an offensive threat. Najee has been good and is shooting the ball well, but that lineup didn't work. Probably did Jonas Valanciunas no favors. If you put Dyson out there, he's got to be willing to shoot, and if he's scared to do that, that's not going to lead to like really good success, and that was disappointing to see from him during all of this. He had some run in late in the third where your lineup was, who was it here? Was Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, and Jonas Valanciunas. The same lineup from earlier. And it just didn't have the success. If that's going to be the case, you've got to try and maximize these lineups. And clearly that one didn't work earlier. I don't know if it was right to go back to that. You could throw Matt Ryan into some of that. You could go with Jordan Hawkins, who isn't scared to shoot and is willing to let the ball rip and sometimes just being a threat. Look, they know Dyson's not going to shoot. You could use Najee as your kind of defensive guy there, I think. Put in a guy like Hawkins for Dyson Daniels and get a little bit more offense out there on the court and see what happens from that. And that's not what happened in this game. And I think it's part of why the Pelicans lost. This was just also not a good matchup. The Celtics are really good. They look like a championship team, right? They look like a championship team. You can't say the same for the Pelicans here. But that's okay because we're not expecting them to be. And now they get a chance to beat the Phoenix Suns. If you do that, that really is going to help you solidify a top 6 spot. So this game is important. I'm excited to be in the Smoothie King Center. I hope you are as well. If you see me, say hi. I appreciate you listening to Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the game.